Wow, that's just what you wanted, right?
Yeah.
I've been playing Pokemon for as long as I've been able to form memories. No, seriously. I came out of the womb with a Game Boy Advance SP. The doctor that delivered me concluded that I would never get laid in my life. For the longest time, I simply played all the main series games like a normal person. I catch a few Pokemon here and there, build a nice team, save the world, beat the champion, blah blah, rinse and repeat. Then Sun and Moon came out during my junior year of high school, and when I tried to pick it up and play, I couldn't even push myself to get past the first island. I had no drive to play the game whatsoever. After playing Pokemon for my whole life, had I finally got sick of the repetitive gameplay formula? That was my last attempt at playing a mainline title until this past year when Sword and Shield came out. My decision to dive back into the series was partially because it was Pokemon's first foray into the Switch, but my reunion was mostly due to a recent niche that I had gotten into, competitive play. Now, Sword and Shield really streamlined the games to make competitive play as accessible as possible, which I'll get to later. But first, we have to understand where Pokemon came from to get to the point where even I would begin to grow interested in the metagame. Now, don't get me wrong, I had always liked the idea of competitive battling. I mean, it sounds super appealing. Two optimized teams facing off in a battle that requires immense wit, strategy, and reading your opponent. The problem was, Game Freak began laying out the complexities of competitive play early on in the franchise, but had no idea how to make it viable for anybody to just pick up, learn, and play. When they first released Red and Blue, I assumed they had no intention of competitive play, because the game was less balanced than Yo Mama on a seesaw. You could just murk anybody with a strong psychic type because its only weakness was bug. So Mewtwo and Alakazam were basically unstoppable. You're telling me you're afraid of this? Get the fuck out of here, Caterpie. Gold and Silver fixed this with the introduction of Dark types and Steel types, which were both resistant to Psychic. Game Freak also further expanded the depth of Pokemon stats by splitting the special stat value into special attack and special defense. This granted them a lot more flexibility when buffing and nerfing Pokemon and moves. And you can give your Pokemon items to hold now, which was huge in adding another layer of strategy to your team. My Ampharos swept through the entire Johto region as soon as I found the Glock in Goldenrod City.
We got an armed robbery at the Azalea Town gym.
Now that Pokemon had solidified its place as the king of handheld gaming, it was beginning to develop its metagame more thoroughly this time around. However, it was not quite there yet. The release of Ruby and Sapphire is where Pokemon really took strides in developing the competitive meta that we know and love today. Gen 3 added several features to optimize and add excitement to the metagame, perhaps the most important of which was the overhaul of the EV-IV system and the addition of natures and abilities. Now with these additions, each and every Pokemon in the dex had its own respective strategy attached to it, and the new EV-IV system further balanced the board, as you can no longer max out every stat to create all-powerful, juiced-up Brock Lesnar Blastoises. With a grand total of 386 different Pokemon, the series was starting to take form as a legitimately engaging competitive platform. Despite the mechanical groundworks being laid down in the third generation titles, competitive play still had a long way to go in terms of actual accessibility. Yeah, I assume there were link cable tournaments for the Game Boy games, but honestly, 8-year-old Johnny had no idea that was going on. He had no idea where his link cable even was. Yo, Kevin.
Who is this?
What's going on? It's Johnny.
Who are you?
It's Johnny from middle school. Listen, I lost my Game Boy Link cable at your house probably 13 years ago when we chilled. Just want to know if you can like look around your couches and in between cushions, see if you can find anything.
Don't ever call me again.
Okay, listen, just have your mom call my mom if you find anything, and then hopefully we can. Fucking hung up on me. In Gen 4, the meta had basically come to full fruition with the introduction of the physical special split, which gave movesets and typings added flexibility. Before this, each Pokemon type was relegated to a physical or special category, so some Pokemon had mismatched stats that went against their typing. By creating both physical and special moves for every type, there was a whole new slew of competitively viable Pokemon that were irrelevant in the past. Okay, now we've reached the point where everything is set for the generations to come. There were still some additions and tweaks to moves that would come in the future, but for the most part, the meta we know today is ready to go. Now, starting with the GTS and Diamond and Pearl, players now had reason to dive into the metagame as wireless, fireless battling made competition way more accessible. Unfortunately, Nintendo is about as good as handling internet functionality as I am at holding conversations. We make an effort, but ultimately putter out and fail. But with each iteration of the games and as hardware got better, the wireless capabilities of the games gradually improved until they were actually halfway decent in the 3DS titles. The games had finally reached a point where the mechanics were fully fleshed out and internet play was viable for anyone who was interested. But there is still one problem. All of this talk about EVs and IVs and PPs is completely intimidating to someone who's new to the scene, and the games never really explain how these essential meta mechanics work. This is where Pokemon Showdown comes in. Released in 2013, it's an online battling simulator that has everything replicated from the actual games down to a T. With this as a tool, anybody can simply make an account and dive into making their own teams. Experimenting with Pokemon was made infinitely easier, as you didn't need to hack Pokemon into your games or manually breed perfect IVs for Pokemon to see what different team combinations were capable of. For people like me who had always wanted to hop into competitive battling but were intimidated by the confusion that came with it, Showdown was a godsend for finally trying it out, and I was hooked from the get-go. I had never realized how much fun the meta could be. With an infinite combination of tactics at your disposal, there's just so much to be explored in terms of finding a team that works for you. Not to mention the chess-like thinking that you must use to actually be successful in-game. It had all become apparent to me after trying out Showdown. So here's the thing. Showdown became popular, as well as strategists on YouTube, but the actual in-game methods of obtaining competitive level Pokemon were still out of reach for most common folk. Enter Pokemon Sword and Shield. Say what you want about the game as a whole and the severe cuts to the national decks.
Yo, you're crying. Are you good, dude?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just thinking about Surskit. Say what you want about the game as a whole and the severe cuts to the national decks, but it's easy to see that Sword and Shield brings with it a new generation of accessible competitive play that has never been done in Pokemon games prior. Each and every aspect of a Pokemon can now be improved or tweaked by some sort of streamlined process. There are some really cool new features added, like you can easily train EVs using the new job system in place. You can now alter IVs with hyper training.
Hell, you can even change your Pokemon's nature now by giving them mints.
No longer are the days of connecting your game to your computer and loading in a hacked team like Mr. Robot. Everything can be done in-house to ensure an optimized team. And this bodes well for the future of Pokemon and competitive battling in general. We see Nintendo taking a step forward to enhance the competitive groundwork that they laid out for us by making everything way easier for a newbie to try. Now this, combined with Pokemon Showdown, has created a competitive scene that's as accessible as ever at this very moment. With more people trying the game comes more variations and strategies and a livelier community. So the time is now. If you've ever enjoyed Pokemon to any degree, take a quick look at the fascinating dynamic world of the Pokemon metagame, and feel free to challenge me on Showdown. My name is johnnybone on there, and I'm pretty ass, but I'll give you a good fight, I guess. I don't know. Now, if you excuse me, I have a date with a Surskit that I'm running late for. So thanks for watching.